my name was 380556C. Yeah, I just threw a lot of numbers at you. But I was incarcerated for 12 years in New Jersey State Prison. And how I grew up, see, there's a backstory to all of this. How I grew up in Plainfield, New Jersey. My mother was a heroin and a drug addict. Rough life, and my older sister and I used to have to break into houses to get food to eat when I was 8, 9 years old. And I lived a real rough life, So when you talk about freedom, I didn't know what that meant. I don't know what freedom is, and life was rough, going to high school, had to go through the metal detectors and getting into fights all the time. I decided high school was not for me. So I dropped out in the 9th grade and I ran them streets hard. I used to sell drugs, get into a lot of fights all the time. But it's not freedom, it's called survival. A lot of people look at people come from the inner city. They're thugs, they're criminals, they're this. But in my eyes, we all just try to survive. So push comes to shove, I was selling drugs in a strip club, and I wound up getting into a physical altercation, and I hurt somebody pretty bad. And I got incarcerated, and they told me, you're gonna do some time. And my bail at the time was $1 million cash. I knew I wasn't going anywhere. And when I got to the county jail for that bid, they told me, they gave me plea offers. So like the first one's like 17 with an 85, the next one was 20 with an 85, and the other one before that, or after that, was 25 with an 85. So that's 25 years I was facing. And I didn't know what to do with my life after that. And it's tough. It's tough when you actually look at what freedom is. Because I didn't know freedom. But when I got to the county jail, when I got incarcerated for this charge, there's two Christians, I'd like to call them, Khalil and Country. They used that cell that I was going in as their chapel. And the first time they popped into my cell, my first day there, I was like, yo, what are y'all doing? At 6 in the morning, the gates popped. Here they came in, marching in with their Bibles and daily breads. And they're like, this is our church. And I'm like, no, this is my cell. So I argued with them, fought with them. It wasn't good. I spit at them. But eventually, after weeks and months go by, I just let them do what they were going to do. I stayed in my cell. And this one time, they were having their devotions. They said they were praying out of the Psalms. It was Psalms 34:6. This poor man cried, the Lord heard him and delivered him out of all his troubles. And something about that verse stuck to me. So I hopped out of my cell, out of my bunk, and I was like, all right, I'm going to pray today, fellas. And they were all happy. And I prayed, and I stuck my finger up like this. I was like, if your God is real, He's going to let me out of this jail. And they were all excited I prayed, but they were mad that I prayed that prayer because they said you can't test God. But I said I prayed what I prayed, and it is what it is. So the very next day, check this out. I was mistakenly released from the county jail. And you can look that up. New York Times, there I was. But when they released me the next day, they took me downstairs. I thought it was a joke. I packed all my stuff up. I'm like, maybe these cats and the guards had something to do with it. But they literally released me out of jail, which is crazy. So I signed my little paperwork. I walked out the jail. I had a tank top on, some shorts. It was snowing outside. But I left. Me being me, I didn't know what was going on. So I walked up the street. I ran into this man who was holding a clipboard. And I don't know what made me ask him, but I asked him if he was lost. And he turned around and told me, no, son, you're lost. You don't know Jesus. And that right there broke me. That right there showed me there was a bigger purpose for my life. And of course, you say, oh, you got mistakenly released. What are you doing? Well, they got me right back in jail. And I wound up serving 12 years in prison. And I dedicated my life to studying the scripture of this divine experience that I had. That I knew it was God calling me. So you got to understand, when I grew up, I didn't go to church. I didn't read the Bible. I didn't do any of that stuff. You know, the only 2 times I stepped foot in the church was a wedding and a funeral. So look at it from that perspective. But I knew the divine was calling me. So I read the Bible, I studied, I started working for a chaplain down Albert C. Wagner Correctional Facility. And the chaplain's name was Emmanuel Beaujolais. And he's like, you know, he taught me everything I know about theology. And he had me reading James Cone, Martin Luther King, Bonhoeffer, Luther. And he told me after a few years, he's like, my son, you're going to go where I went. And he's a Haitian dude. So I'm like, all right, man, where am I going? To Haiti? I said, dude, I ain't going there. And he's like, no, you're going to my school I went to, Princeton Seminary. And I never laughed so hard in my life. Why would they accept me into Princeton? Princeton has a name of its own, you know what I mean? And I laughed at him so hard. And he's like, just you wait. And I said, all right, dude, whatever. But I served my time. And eventually I was able to go to Pillar College and get my undergraduate degree in biblical studies. And at that graduation, there was Beaujolais standing in the back. I don't know how he found me, but he found me. And he came up to me after the ceremony, and he was like, my son, are you ready? I was like, ready for what? And he goes, you're going to Princeton. And that Monday, he had me an interview at Princeton Seminary. And I got a full scholarship, and, you know, it was life-changing. So when you talk about freedom, you know, freedom is for the beloved community. Freedom is when everybody else believes in who you are as a human being. Freedom is when you have opportunity. And not many are afforded opportunity because it's hard to create it on your own. You need the village to help you achieve your dreams. And what am I doing right now? Right now, I am the pastor of St. Bartholomew's Lutheran Church in Trenton, New Jersey. I know. From prison to Princeton to pastor. Here I am. That's what freedom is, when other people believe and see your common humanity, that you are created in the divine image. What else can you expect? If you are a true believer in the living God, you will see God in everybody you encounter. We point to the cross. We point to the cross of one who was crucified for all of us, for me and for you. Can you feel it? Do you understand what it means to be beloved and created in God's image? I didn't know it for most of my life. But through this beloved community, I embrace it. Amen. What does freedom mean for you? There are various ways one can be free. Free to choose their clothes, their vocation, husband or wives or significant other, even their general demeanor. One also can be free from negative thoughts and behaviors. Although this is difficult to practice every single minute of every single day. But the idea stands that we can choose to be free in terms of our behaviors and actions. Finally, we should be free from any oppression. We should have freedom of speech and be free to lead the lives that we want. One type of freedom I have not alluded to is probably something that is most relevant to who I am. This is my physical freedom. Not to be locked behind doors, gates and walls with staff monitoring every day of my walk, every day of my waking and sleeping, every hour. In the most literal way possible, I had my freedom taken away. Or at least that's the story we all agree on around prison. My rights as I think of them, being a father, moving about as I please, phone, internet, privacy, and of course good food, were unavailable. In their place were uniformity and arbitrary interpretations of bureaucracy by government employees. My name was replaced with a number. I took on the burden of a stigma that will follow me for the rest of my life. I was incarcerated for 144 months, or 12 years, whichever sounds more dramatic. I did not have family to be supportive throughout this huge traumatic time. However, my time away had me realize that my freedom means being able to breathe fresh air, to swim, to walk, to love. It means to be able to go to church. That's what I think of when I picture this word, freedom. This is the pain that stabs my heart when I visualize being free. Here's what you could have won. I missed real food, real people, real air, road rage, traffic jams, and car parking fees. I missed my friends, my job, my sense of belonging, a purpose. I longed for nature, the great outdoors, flowers, birds, and trees, even wasps that would love to only inflict pain upon me. I even missed the agonizing chores of cleaning the house, mowing the lawn, and the horrendous ordeal that is food shopping, especially around the holidays. In short, I missed me. I found a glimpse of freedom reading Cohn, King, Bonhoeffer, Luther, and learned that to me, freedom is not so much an external phenomenon, but rather a result of one's inner spiritual nature. Our theology teaches us that freedom is submission to Christ through faith, the theology of the cross. This freedom allows for a joyous exchange of the sinner's sins, death, and damnation for Christ's grace, life, and salvation. This freedom then allows the believer to become a dutiful servant, which thrusts the Christian back into human life. See, our engagement with the world is then not motivated by any instrumental ends, get into heaven per se, but rather results from the freedom found in faith. See, people that lived on the outside, who are supposedly free, are busy creating prisons for themselves, numbing and limiting and avoiding and spiraling. Freedom is one of those things that are deeply attractive as well as terrifying. Who would we be if we were all truly free? Do we even know what it means to be free? I would say no one is ever really free, but there are surprisingly ways to access moments of it regardless of circumstance. Between the clarity of living in prison metaphor and my general insolence at being told what to do, no one gets to tell me on what date that I would finally be. It became my mission to figure out what it would look like to find freedom in a place where it was not supposed to be found. I figured if I could tense my muscles just so, like I did as a child, if I could redefine what it meant to be free, then I could ascend into a different viewpoint. See, in prison, I had to bump up against my own frailty, despair, and regret. Disconnect slithered into the layers of grief. It was a long time to go without being touched or called by my name. It was painful to accept that I didn't end up in that place by accident, that I was no better or worse than anyone there. There was no way of escaping the scariest parts, the things I hide out of fear that I might be unlovable. And hard as it was, the effort paid off. I read books, I wrote, I studied, and I played endless games of Scrabble and chess. And while those things helped, the freedom I found, despite incarceration, came from that hard surrender of accepting my situation and from refusing to accept the blind storyline around it, the one responsible for allotting parcels of a particular brand of freedom. I owned my own story, my narrative. And accepting that I was in prison to stay until my release date, and that the responsibility for that was on me. I saw that I had the option to decide whether to do that time angrily and afraid, or to educate myself and even allow myself to laugh or be appreciative for the things that were still good. This is a freedom that no one can take away. And long after prison, I still succumb to distractions that just don't work. I'm still me, flawed and fearful. I still hope that the next thing, job, a pair of fresh jeans, friendships might somehow liberate me from the heaviness of adult responsibility. But I am clear for getting cracked wide open, and mostly remember that only real freedom is to breathe, to surrender, to choose grace, kindness, and love. It's the best I can do for me, and the best gift I can give my family, whom has had to engage in far more sophisticated conversations about justice than most people. We deserve to know this ever accessible kind of freedom. And I won't pretend that it's easy, or that these moments are delivered in shiny packages. Humanity is sweat and blood and tears. But I am so grateful to know that no matter what is happening, whether I am feeling my successful best or I am tenderly navigating another loss, freedom is an option. However, I have seen the horrors of the carceral state. The ways that law and order has landed more black men in prison today than there were enslaved in 1850, which Michelle Alexander calls the new Jim Crow. But none of this captures what one person experiences when he is cut off from his community, denied an opportunity for growth, subjects to constant humiliation and threat of bodily harm, and told that he's permanently condemned to this status of being criminal or illegal. What does it mean to be told that you'll rot in prison? What does it mean for a nation to condemn our neighbors to a hell of our own making? See, strange as it may seem, God is saying something to the church in America. Go to hell. When I was in prison, Jesus said in Matthew 25, "You visited me." We find Jesus in prison because prison is where Jesus has established residence here on earth. We follow Jesus into the hell of America's prison because this is the way God has revealed for us to receive the gift of resurrection life. This probably doesn't make a lot of sense to you. You may have been raised to stay out of trouble, to act right and to talk right and to believe that this contributed to your so-called Christian witness. God, you may have thought, is happy with those who stay on the right side of the law. But God said, go to hell. If we say that we have no sin, we deceive ourselves and the truth is not in us. The biblical prophets rebuked worship that was not rooted in love and justice and compassion for the most vulnerable. The prophet Amos said that worship can just be noise to God, and that there are times God would rather not listen to our singing when our actions hurt the poor. The New Testament says that we can have faith to move mountains and do all sorts of miracles. But if we have not love, it's all meaningless, like an empty gong or a clanging cymbal. No one will be declared righteous in his sight by observing the law. But now a righteousness from God apart from law has been made known, to which the law and the prophets testify. See, in prison, I discovered that the living word was present there. Christ descended into hell and on the third day rose again. See, God's way up is down. A chaplain said that to me when I was in prison, and I think he was right. But I didn't get it at that time. I'm not sure how I could get it because, like so many others, I did not know the gospel. Jesus went to hell on the way to resurrection. And if we had died with him, the prisoner Paul asks, will we not also live with him? Go to hell, God says. Not to stay there, but to learn what you and I can only hear there. Namely, the good news, the gospel. See, no one is beyond redemption. No one is beyond hope. And everyone is deserving of being treated with love and respect. And the church depends on people gathering together in the common faith that this truth alone can sustain all of us. Since in the end, everything else will burn away like dross, right? It behooves us to follow Jesus into hell, even now. See, we are made entirely of cells and stories, and these two things are inseparable. We are always free to choose the best versions of our experiences, to live while we are here. So you ask what freedom is. Freedom is hope. Freedom is change. Freedom is to never count anybody out. Freedom is to love as God has loved and to be with those who desperately need to see God's grace. Thank you.